Okay, so far in CSS, we've been talking about a lot about actually different properties that you can use to format text, and there's a lot more properties that we're going to be talking about in the next few weeks. But we spent a lot of time on how you can format text in the properties. What we want to do in this video is begin looking at deciding on the selector, the type of selectors, and the selector ends up being what you want to style. We now have somewhat of a cache of properties to style with, but what are we going to apply them to? So we need to look at selectors. The tag selector is the most basic of all. The book calls it a simple selector. I prefer tag because it's more direct and it says exactly what it is. It's for page-wide styling. Tag selectors apply to every occurrence of an HTML tag on the web page. So if you had a H1 tag and you had a selector, it would merely be H1 as well. A paragraph tag, the selector would be P. A code tag would be code. So whatever is between the opening and closing brackets, the name of the tag itself, that is also the name of the selector. And in this example, if we had a selector of H1 and we had some styles or some properties and values in here, some declarations, it would style every H1 the same way. So it wouldn't be just the first one or any one in particular, it would be all of them. So that's a tag selector. It's pretty simple. There is a universal selector. This is just an asterisk. This is shorthand for selecting every single tag. It would apply to every element and does not rely on a property that's inherited from the rules that apply to the body or parent element. So it never considers what it's inheriting. It's going to apply this style to it. And you see this used a lot in sections, where you want to style a specific section. You might have a sidebar and you want all the text in the sidebar to be a certain color. Well, you might have H1 tags, you have paragraph tags, you have some inline tags that go along with that. You could have many tags, an unordered list. All that could be in that sidebar, and rather than changing each one of them individually, we would just use the asterisk and set the color then to blue or whatever it is. The example here shows it being used for everything. This would set everything in the entire page as bold. You're more likely going to see it used like this within an ID element. We'll talk about IDs in just a minute, where it's going to set every element that is a descendant of an tag that has the ID of banner. And it would set everything to the font weight of bold. The group selector. Again, the book refers to this as type. I think group makes more sense. It's a little bit more logical to me. It's just a list of selectors separated by a comma. The comma is very important. So if we had this as a selector, it would actually style all the H1s, all the H2s, all the H3s, and so on. So it would apply to all of those. You wouldn't have to create a selector for each one if you're applying the same thing. Most commonly, if you had something like all these headers listed there in a group element or a group selector, you would probably be setting the font family. This also would apply, and we'll talk about them, to any IDs as well as classes. So this would style any H1, any paragraph tag, I should say every H1, every paragraph, every element that has or tag that has a class of copyright, and every element that has the ID of banner. We'll talk about class and IDs here in just a moment. So it's not just for tags, it can also be other types of selectors. A class selector. This gives you a little bit more pinpoint control. Rather than selecting all the or styling all the paragraph tags, now you can say, well, I want this paragraph tag to be different. And you can do that with a class selector. You can choose whatever name you want for that. It allows you to pinpoint exact elements that are going to be styled this way regardless of its tag. So a class selector, a class name could be used for a paragraph tag and an H1 tag if you want it. You could apply it to both. It isn't selector dependent. When you create a class selector, it must begin with a period. CSS allows for letters, numbers, hyphens, and underscores in class names. After the period, though, the name must start with a letter. After that, you can have numbers, hyphens, and underscores. And they are case sensitive. Now, you can use the class selector in one of two ways. One, you could simply assign a rule that applies to any element that has that class. So in this example here, we have a class selector .code. On this side, we have a paragraph tag that has a class of code. We also have an aside tag that has a class of code. So whatever declarations are inside this declaration block would apply to both the paragraph tag here as well as the aside tag. You can also create a selector that only works for a specific element, and it would be that element that carries that class. So again, here on the right, we have a selector that is p.important. That's read as any paragraph tag with the class of important. Well, that would only apply to this. This one is not a paragraph tag. It's an aside tag. So any declarations in this declaration block would only apply to the paragraph tag here. However, since this is just a class and it's not associated directly with element, this would apply, just as the one above, to both of these. It's also possible to have multiple classes. In this example here, we have a paragraph tag with a class of important as well as code. Notice that they're separated by a space, not a comma. Font families are the only things that use commas, so it's just a space. The important class as well as the code class would be applied. So any declaration in here would apply to this. Any declarations in here would apply to it. And then, since this is a paragraph tag and it does have the class of important, this would apply to it as well. You want to make things a little bit more confusing? This selector is specifically for a paragraph tag with the important and code classes. So in this particular case, this paragraph tag with a class of important and code would want to apply any declarations from 4 different selectors. Things get confusing, and they get confusing real quick sometimes. We will talk about how the browser decides which overrides which in a different video, because all 4 of these could designate the color differently. What if this one, the code had a color, class code had a color of blue, the P element with the important attribute or the important class has red, the important class has orange, and the p.important.code has yellow. Well, which color is it going to be? All 4 of these apply to it. We'll talk about that in a different video. For now, it's important that you understand how to write the class and how that gets applied. The class attribute, the value of that is the value that you're going to use for the selector with a dot in front of it. ID selectors. These are for very specific elements. An ID selector is used to identify a unique part of the page. Whenever you use an ID and you give it a name, that ID name should only be used on that one tag or that one element. It should not be used on multiple ones. It can be. The browser will recognize it and will use it accordingly, but that's what the class is for. The ID is to pinpoint a specific element. So never use the same ID value for multiple elements. If you're going to do that, you should be using a class. You're going to use an ID or a class selector. Basically, if the style will be used several times on a page, you're going to use a class. If the IDs to identify sections that only occur once, you're going to use an ID. If the ID selector, or if you're trying to avoid possible conflicts, the ID selector should be used because it's going to have priority over a class selector. And again, we're going to talk about this in another video. You can have more than one tag with an ID, like I said. However, HTML won't validate. That doesn't mean it won't use it and apply the styles to it. It just won't validate when you go out to the W3C or any of the other sites that validate your code to make sure it's written properly. Naming rules are the same as classes. The only difference is that you use the hash mark instead of a period. So if we had a paragraph tag with an ID of banner, the selector would be #banner. Now you could put p#banner, which would say any paragraph tag with the ID of banner, but why do that when there should only be one ID banner anyway? It shouldn't be tag dependent because it should always be only one. The other thing, although it's minuscule and you don't see it, it takes longer to process it if you have the P in front of it, because the browser then actually has to go through and look at every paragraph tag looking for the one or ones that has the ID of banner. So very rarely are you going to use a tag selector in combination with an ID selector. It's important that we understand relationships before we go on. The ancestor, any HTML tag that wraps around another tag. A descendant, any tag inside one or more tags. The parent, the closest ancestor of a tag. The child, a tag directly enclosed by another tag. And a sibling, tags that are children of the same tag. It's important that you understand these relationships as we go on. And now that we've talked about those relationships, here's a child selector. It lets you format the children of another tag with the child selector. So the body greater than H1 would only style H1 tags that are directly underneath the body, children of the body, whereby the body H1 with a space in between the two would style any H1 nested underneath the body. That's a descendant selector that we're going to talk about in just a second. So if we look at these in reverse order, this selector would style both of these in this particular HTML section. Both the first and the second H1 would be styled with this. However, if we wanted to designate just the first one by using this selector, it would only style this. The first is a child of the body, section's a child of the body, but the second H1 is a child of section, so it's a descendant of the body, not a child. Only the first is a child, so that would be styled with this selector. And the descendant selectors now. This allows you to format several tags in a similar manner to what we looked at, but only when they're in a particular part of the page. It allows you to format a tag based on its relationship to other tags. So if you look at this code, this sample code here, we have a paragraph tag that has a strong tag inside of it. Well, we also have a code tag that has a strong tag inside of it. So if we made our selector strong, it would style both the important in the paragraph as well as the goes here in the code element. It would style both of them. However, by using a descendant selector, it will allow you to format the tags differently based on where they appear within other tags or styles. You create it by tacking together the selectors according to the part of the family tree you want to format. The most senior ancestor is on the left, The one that's being styled again is actually on the right. So if we wanted to only style the strong tag that's in the paragraph, we would do this. Our selector would be P space strong. So any strong tag that is a descendant of any paragraph tag. So now we've looked at some of these, it's a good idea to take a moment here and talk about how we want to read these. In this example I've got highlighted now, all three of these selectors style an anchor tag. So if we had a paragraph tag that had a class of intro and an anchor tag, it would style it. If we had a paragraph tag that had a descendant that had a class of intro and an anchor tag, it would style the anchor tag. If there was a tag that had the class of intro and an anchor tag in it, it would style the anchor tag. So you tend to read these a little bit backwards, and we've seen both examples of these already, but now we're ready to put it into some practical use. All three of these, yes, will style an anchor tag. They do not necessarily all apply to the same tags. In the first one, it's going to style any anchor tag that's a descendant of a paragraph with the class of intro. So the paragraph tag would have to have a class of intro in order for that anchor tag to be styled. In the second one, we're going to style an anchor tag that is a descendant of any element that has the class of intro that is a descendant of a paragraph. And in the last one, it's an anchor tag that's going to be styled when it's a descendant of any element that has the class of intro. So while all three of these style the anchor tag, they're all slightly different. This would be a 3 levels of ancestry. This would be 2 levels of ancestry, as would be the last one here. Getting the hang of how to read these and how to write them is a little tricky, and hopefully it'll come to you as you practice it. Here's an example of some things here. Let's say, for example, we wanted to style all the anchor tags that were a descendant of an LI. In other words, we want to style these 3 anchor tags. We do not want to style this one, because this one is a descendant of the strong tag, where these 3 are descendants of LIs. So we could use something as simple as LIA. Would that work? Sure. Is this a descendant of an LI? No. It's a descendant of the strong tag. However, all 3 of these are descendants of LIs. Different LIs, granted, but they're all descendants of LI. All of these selectors that you see here are possible selectors to style just those anchor tags. The first one, an anchor tag that's a descendant of an LI, that's a descendant of a UL. Sure they are. Follow the tree here and you'll see that they all lead up to this UL. An anchor tag that's a descendant of an LI, that's a descendant of a body. Again, any of these anchor tags, if you follow the hierarchy chart, yes indeed, body, LI, A, that's legitimate. HTML LIA, again, that's a true one. And the HTML body LIA. So any of these could be used to format these 3 anchor tags and not this one. As you're going to see in a different video, formatting instructions from a long-winded descendant, so to speak, such as this last one here, can override simple class or tag styles. We'll talk about that in a different video though. Adjacent siblings. We use a plus sign for this. This is a tag that appears immediately after another tag in HTML. So in this case, this is saying any paragraph tag that is a direct sibling, adjacent sibling to an H1. If we go back to this last hierarchy chart, you'll see that we actually do have one of those in here. This paragraph tag and this H1 are both descendants or children. They're both children of the body, and they are adjacent to each other. They follow each other in code after the body. A general sibling selector is just slightly different, but it matches an element type that is a sibling to another. This is part of CSS 3, and you would use a tilde in order to define that. In the case of the general sibling, as opposed to the adjacent, it does not have to be adjacent. So it could be anywhere. Again, we'll take a look at this, and it's not true, but if that selector had been H1 tilde UL, well, the UL is a sibling. It's just not an adjacent sibling. Had it been H1 tilde UL, would have applied to that. So this is a sibling but not adjacent. Any sibling just doesn't have to be adjacent, while this means that it has to be adjacent. You can use the child and sibling selectors to reduce dependency on classes in your markup. A child and adjacent sibling selector can reduce the number of class attributes you need to add into an HTML document. So there's lots of different theories here. A lot of people might go out and add a class if they wanted to style a specific paragraph, when you could actually indeed get by using a child or a sibling selector. You might say, well, what's the big difference? Well, it's a little bit more code. You have to go in and actually add that class into the HTML. You have to create a different selector just for that class, just for that element with that class, whatever it happens to be, and you can get by without that in some cases. So let's look at an example. You can see we just got a simple body here. We've got a paragraph tag and then a divider that has 5 more paragraph tags. In our CSS, we have a couple different ones. Just first of all, any paragraph tag is going to have the font family Arial, Verdana, and Sans Serif. So that would apply to all of them. Any divider that, or any paragraph tag that is a child of the divider, is going to have a border. So any paragraph tag that's a child of the divider, that would apply to all of these. They're all children of the divider. This is a good reason for indentation again. So all 4 of these, or all 5 of these then, are going to have that 1 pixel solid black border. Here's a tricky one though. To turn the background color to a dark gray, or medium gray probably is more the case there, any paragraph tag that's an adjacent sibling to a paragraph tag that's an adjacent sibling to a paragraph tag. Woo! Let's take a look at the code on that one. Is this one a direct sibling of a paragraph tag? No, not at all. So it doesn't fit any of that. Is the second one a direct sibling of a paragraph tag? Yeah, it is. This one right here. Is this one then a direct sibling? No. So this background color will not be applied here either. Get to the third one though. Is this paragraph a adjacent sibling to another paragraph? Yes, it is. This one. Is this one a adjacent sibling to another paragraph tag? Yes, it is. This one here. The same applies for the last 2. So we should only get that dark gray background on the bottom 3 and not the top 2, while at the same time they should all have a border and they all should be in Arial. So let's take a look at that. And indeed, you see the first one, nothing was done to it. That's the one that is outside of the divider element. They all have borders, and only the last 3 have the background color. So that's how you could use some of those. Now we do have a few more selectors we need to look at, and those are attribute selectors. So that'll be in the next video. We'll cover attribute selectors and do a little bit of review and reinforcement on lengths.